it's really about designing the products with the user in mind, and especially data products to be transparent and using as much tech as possible to actually provide more explainability than less, like going towards the consumer, being owned by consumer, being used by the consumer. So tech is not only in academia or just in some cold IT server department. It's everywhere, and it makes us better. It makes us more efficient. And cheers for that.
Welcome to a brand new episode of Ingatika's interview series. I'm your host, Jacob Bollinger, and we're really glad to have you join us today. And today we have CEO at Illumex AI, Inna Tokarev-Sela, on the show. Did I say that right?
Nice job. Thanks.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. The Ingatika series is a powerhouse of insights from industry experts and influencers from around the world, a platform that provides the latest news on AI, automation, and technologies that will help you grow your business. Come be a part of our community, learn, share, and grow with us. So, Inna, what do you think are challenges that many companies face in making data-driven decisions?
Well, this one, it's old but never gets old, right? So yeah, we hear this question quite often, and I would say it's a combination of few factors. So first of all, to be data-driven, you really need to have insights on time. Right. So if it takes 2 months to get your BI business intelligence dashboard, it's just too long. And you know, especially if the market is changing, the line of business changing, and we really need to understand like what the reality is of today. It's time is a big factor. Second, I would say is just a sense of incomplete data. So what we have in organizations today is not necessarily, first of all, utilized well. We can see from our experience, only 20% of organizational data is actually analyzed, and most of the data in the dark. Industry analysts call it dark data. So not always full comprehensive data is taken into consideration. And as we live in this rich and ever-changing world, most of the important data is actually shifting to be outside organization. All this data seem, if it's weather about hurricanes or some pandemic, you know, we have a new one now. So it's never-ending story of how data is ever-changing. So being able to take into consideration full and comprehensive data to the business and to the question in hand is imperative. And you know, we say that 80% of doing analytics is finding the right data. So I would say this percentage will go up and up unless we automate most of the process. And I would say the most pressing and painful element of data-driven decision making is lost in translation, right? So business VP sales, let's say, ask how, like, show me the drivers of lead to opportunity conversion rates, and then this business question should be understood correctly by a technical person. If it's analyst or if it's data scientist, so lost in translation between business questions and the technical implementations are a big factor. And then decision maker gets the result. And the result doesn't really match the gut feeling. And what they can do is they cannot really reverse engineer the neural nets model. So this lost in translation is a big dissonance that we still have, and didn't really solve industry-wide.
Okay. So to kind of re-elaborate your second point, do you feel like it's more of there's too much information, like too much data is collected, and then we're not able to parse like this is important, and this is important? Or do you feel like just not enough of the data is being analyzed properly?
So I would say the first one. Andrew Ng in his recent interviews stressed out that they would rather have smaller data but more relevant one than huge big data and pulling resources into processing, boiling the ocean. So it's really having context aware system or data which could be relevant for your specific question. And we as humans can only perceive, our context, right? So I have a specific experience, so I think that to answer this question, we should use such and such. And someone else which have, like, I'm coming from enterprise, you're coming from startups, maybe SaaS B2B metrics is something which I'm not familiar with, but you know better. So having this collaboration between people from multidisciplinary backgrounds should help to really understand which data is relevant to which question.
Yeah. A previous guest on our show too, he was a lawyer, and he took a master's in understanding like the basics of computer science, so he could better help understand like the technical challenges as well as those legal challenges with new AI. So yeah, I think it is really apparent that we need this kind of mesh of fields in order to understand this expanding area. Yeah. So kind of to jump off that, in machine learning, we have simpler models whose predictions are pretty explainable. Then there are more complex deep learning models, which can be really good, really accurate, but at the same time are pretty hard to explain. So how do we balance explainability versus accuracy while generating insights? Kind of in the same vein of lost in translation that you were talking about before between the technical guy and the decision maker.
Yeah. So I would say the cornerstone is trust, like really having the trust established. But for now, unfortunately, the explainability is most stressed in the industries which are heavily governed and have compliance requirements. So explainability is mostly implemented there because it's just prerequisite for using AI in production. Like think about insurance, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and so on and so forth. It's nothing you can do about it. Whereas in industries like e-commerce, for example, it's usually or oftentimes the black box. And I would say it's a known statistic that 80% of AI projects do not go to production, never get to production. And one of the explanations is you need a consumer for Tango. So you as AI practitioner implemented the greatest model ever, but if your user doesn't trust your findings, it will not be adopted and it will fail to be in production. So, and we're still in this 80% of failure rate, and a few of the methods has been around for 5 years or so. Think about SHAP or LIME, the different frameworks which data scientist teams can choose to implement in addition to their core engines, not only to understand if the accuracy is there, but also to understand if explanation makes sense to the decision maker. And we like to use as causality and correlation, right? So some things are causality, like for example, if your leads change, right, in marketing. So it could be different channel that you used. It could be different campaign. It could be different demographics. So for example, something could be just correlated. You just went to younger people in Germany and the leads went up. So is it causality? Is it correlation? So we really need to understand with using those frameworks and the new development ones to understand not only the end result, that things are connected together, but also if they do have some sequential influence on each other.
Okay. Yeah. In addition, data collection, transformation, and analyzing and finding those insights and data can add a lot of value to organizations. But what makes it even more value is to provide actionable like intel, kind of building off of this building trust factor. What are your thoughts on these insights, and what are the challenges in generating these insights? You've kind of touched on this briefly with the frameworks, but just is there anything else you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that a data consumer should be involved much earlier in the process. So if you would like your insights be actionable, you should involve your stakeholder in actually, ideation stage of what could be relevant, like which data streams could be relevant. So right now I'm selling fridges in I don't know, Spain.
Mhm,
Okay, and the weather is super hot.
mhm.
It could affect, right? And data scientists would not necessarily like this is a simple case, right? So it's
Yeah.
called signal. So it's natural to think about signals which are natural for us to correlate, but business user would know that, right?
Mhm.
So business user have those whether those are explicit knowledge or implicit experience is something they can combine together in much more powerful deliverables. So if you involve your users early on, if you build your models with explainability, if you take into consideration the comprehensive data that should be run on, I believe that the insights will be actionable. But again, it should be also timely. Time is money. So
Yeah, that is, I find like the idea or your idea about involving users earlier really interesting, because in my business class this year, we talked about like the 5 stages of product development. And in every single stage, there's always a reach out to the consumer, make sure it
mhm.
actually makes sense. And so I think involving that into actual computer science instead of just building some abstract model, I think that's a really, really interesting idea. Yeah.
But this is also that business users need to be responsible for as well. So being data literate,
Mhm,
like understand the basics of how statistics works, maybe
mhm.
not in a deep sense, but having vocabulary which they can operate with more technical people to explain themselves. Of course, there should be software and governance and all these vehicles, frameworks and policies and software in place to facilitate those collaborations. But both sides need to give this extra step. Otherwise, we will still have this lost in translation in the middle.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so this is actually very interesting. What are some up and coming technologies in the machine learning space that you would like to talk about or mention?
There are so many, first of all, and of course, genomics is interesting. But I'm personally is expert in graphs. I'm writing about graphs, and I have been working with graphs for the past 20 years. When we didn't have graph databases, still like when we were programming graphs in MATLAB, it was a different era. I believe right now we have like in machine learning, we have this melt of volumes of data, like big data came, and then we have processing jumping to high capacity, and then we have new types of algorithms. So 3 factors were combined together and in machine learning suddenly got into much more adoption than it used to be. And same comes with graphs. So right now, I believe this beginning of era of graphs is because we start to also in technical units we start to think as business people. So business people think associatively. So if you have account has a product and it has contract and it has geography, whatever. So we're thinking about this associative map of logic and how it behaves and which processes I can build on top of it. So it's very like our work is multidimensional. Whereas in data, so far, we use very flat understanding how different entities connect to each other, right? So, for example, Ina has a specific income and of specific age and lives in specific place. So this is like my very flat model, but how Ina is in the context of work, right? So which dimensions, like which attributes do I have as a working person? For example, I drink 3 coffees, right? And as a home person, I do yoga and matcha, right? So we have different personalities and different contexts, and same goes for business data. So graphs as a technology which has been around for quite a while, Suddenly, due to the new generation of graph databases and the vast of data and the new algos, suddenly they get into business use cases. And then you can really model your space in a multidimensional model, which means you can correlate and you can understand dependencies between many more things and the much richer environment that we ever had before. And of course, it was used in Homeland always, but now also automotives and e-commerce and manufacturing start to adopt graphs as well to really make the processes much more efficient, but also explainable, because in graphs, when you see graph, you can really understand how things are related to each other, and you have cohorts like you have clusters in graph. It's really simple to understand how logic works, in opposites to black box approaches.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Yeah, I've never like trying to picture, like I find when I'm coding, most of the problem is trying to envision what I want. And so using like a graph model is a lot easier to envision a problem and then implement it, which I think could also help in, like, as you said, time is money. And so that could really speed up if used properly.
But that you can explain it to your customer, right?
Yeah,
You can explain
yeah.
it like, this is how it looks like, and in the visual way. We are visual, human beings, visual species. So
Yeah. So speaking further on kind of more like broadband ideas, how do you think the economic downturn affects how organizations are approaching machine learning and AI adoption in general?
So what we see, it's actually same as we saw in COVID, it accelerates digital transformation. So when we have crises, right? So we need to have changes in place very fast. And those changes usually happen based on some analysis that you run. So for businesses to be able to analyze changes, to analyze different, economic factors and so on and so forth fast, you need to have technology in place. So it accelerates digital transformation, it accelerates the efficiencies of how businesses are run, whether it's online, SaaS, cloud, machine learning, closing reports, which used to take 6 weeks, now takes businesses 1 week with the new online machine learning driven tools. So all of that actually accelerates digital transformation. But also, in addition, we do have Gartners and other industry analysts saying that more than over 40% of organizations globally actually transfer the digital transformation budgets from IT to business functions, to P&Ls. So marketing, sales, customer success actually gets budgets to build their own technology stacks, which are facilitating their processes. So really understanding the existing processes in place and not relating to some third party like IT, for example, to automate, design, and implement this process, but really doing it with vendors straightforward by themselves. So it shortens the cycle where tech is being adopted. It gives the ownership sense to the business units, and usually they get the results much faster.
That is interesting. That is like the opposite of how I thought it would go. Like I thought people would be more risk adverse, but no, it makes sense that it's like a crucible and people need to, either prioritize and grow or get left behind. That is
you need to do more with less.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. Do you have any last thoughts, final words for us before we close out the show?
Well, I would say, to summarize our discussions and all these questions which we discussed today, it's really about designing the products with the user in mind and especially data products to be transparent and using as much tech as possible to actually provide more explainability than less, like going towards the consumer, being owned by consumer, being used by the consumer. So tech is not only in academia or just in some cold IT server department. It's everywhere, and it makes us better. It makes us more efficient, and cheers for that.
Yeah. Okay. So your emphasis is on a consumer-driven
Yes,
approach. Yes.
of course.
Okay. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing with us today. For more content, consider subscribing to Engati and tap the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders around the globe. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time with a new expert soon.